So I saw something really disturbing online today, and it was about this nurse. Her name is Luana Rivers, and I think she was a agency sort of nurse, a relieving nurse from would go around to different, hospitals and to sort of as a backup nurse sort of thing. And she works in intensive care, and she said, and you may have seen this online, but I'll show you what she was saying in this video where she was quite distressed.
Y'all, that assignment there broke me. I was put in what's called a pit. And in this pit was 8 patients, all COVID positive. My first day of orientation, I was told that whatever patients go into the pit, they only come out in a body bag. I had one patient that was called the VIP patient. She was a doctor's wife. And when I say they pulled out all the stops for that woman, it wasn't nothing that they didn't do for that woman. And guess what? She was the one patient that made it out of that ICU alive and was able to downgrade to a long-term acute care.
There are so many things wrong with this. Firstly, this is an example, and she has talked about this in another video where it was a couple of hours long. I didn't see all of it yet, but she was talking about how, the local government in El Paso doesn't seem to want to shut down the economy. Basically, they need to shut it all down because it's going to become endemic, basically. COVID at this point is just everywhere. There's about 500,000 Latinos in El Paso, I think. And I don't know the different races that are going through this place called the Pit, but I'm just wondering if they are Latinos, the Latinx community, basically. And she said in another video that there are patients that are, like 20 years old, 40 years old in this pit. And when they go in there, they have little chance of, pretty much zero chance of survival. It sounds like they're basically put in there in a sort of palliative measure where they're on ventilators, they're sedated. But, and apparently there's code blues all the time, there's cardiac arrests all the time in this ICU. And she said, this nurse, Luana Rivers, said, she just felt like she couldn't do it anymore, trying to resuscitate these patients. And she was doing it kind of on her own. And apparently the doctors said to her when she asked, look, you need to come down and see one of these patients. They said, well, we don't go into these COVID rooms. I guess they feel like they're more important than the nurses that are all going in there and being exposed constantly to COVID. Apparently, that's the case. It looks like, anyway. And on top of that, you've heard that she said that a doctor's wife got the real royal treatment, and they did everything they possibly could to save her. And this says two things to me. If those patients are Latinx patients and they're not in the same class, say, for example, as the doctor's wife, they don't get any treatment when they come in. They don't get any aggressive treatment when they come in to the emergency department, and they seem to be just abandoned when they get to ICU. So that's sort of outrageous. I'm a former nurse, a retired nurse, and I've worked in intensive care units, and I've worked in neurological intensive care units too. I understand, of course, in this situation, COVID is basically has basically put so much pressure on these hospitals that they can't cope. And it sounds like they're triaging patients. But in this particular case with El Paso, and that's a terrible thing, because in a place like the United States, they should have been prepared for this, and they're not. And El Paso now is absolutely overrun. There's people dying, by the dozens every day in El Paso from, in the hospital, in that one particular hospital, I think. They're having to bring in morgue trucks, like freezer trucks, 6 or something freezer trucks to put all the bodies in. And this is sort of like something you might expect in a war zone. And there's absolutely no reason for this, really. There's no good excuse for this, except that it seems like, these Western countries are doing the worst at this because they're so hell-bent on this almighty capitalism, keeping the economy or keeping their corporate friends happy and keeping the economy. The economy rules, and the economy is more important than the people. And this is what is wrong with capitalism. This is what is wrong with neoliberalism. It is a nightmare. It is anti-people. And this is a really distilled example why neoliberalism and capitalism needs to end. She said, it's appalling. She said how they're just basically, they did everything to save that doctor's wife, and she survived and went into long-term acute care. But all these other people, basically, 9 out of 10, they know that they're not going to come out of this place called the pit alive. Now, I don't know if this is some separate section to intensive care, or that's what they call intensive care. I'm not sure what the story is with that. But it is so wrong, firstly, to abandon patients just because they are not of the same class as the doctor's wife. And two, I imagine they might be Latinx patients. And three, it's not fair on the nurses or any of the staff there that have to be put in these dangerous situations day after day, and there is absolutely nothing being done by the local governments or the federal government to really get this under control. I mean, the United States is an absolute calamity at this point. The amount of, as somebody said, it becomes endemic at some point, and there's nothing you can do. At this point, there's probably, it'll probably be something that is so rampant in the community that the only thing you could do is just lock everything down. I mean, she was sort of asking people to call the various local government representatives or the mayor in El Paso and absolutely beg them to shut down, lock the city down. But they don't want to. And this is like criminal. It's criminal to be doing this to these people in this city. And this is why capitalism has to end. This is why neoliberalism has to end, because people are irrelevant. It is the politics of disposability. People are irrelevant. I've never worked in an intensive care unit like that, and I would never want to. If ever there was a cardiac arrest of somebody, you would have everybody, all hands on deck, and they would, everybody would be there, and they would make sure that that person got the care that they required. And I don't know if this UMC, I think it's called University Medical Clinic in El Paso, I don't know if it's a private hospital where those patients, even though they die, they still have the medical bill. They still have to, their relatives will have to pay for the medical bill. I don't know. But I mean, this is where Medicare for all, this is where that needs to be brought into the United States. But they won't even do that in a pandemic. See, this tells you everything. The United States is a failed state. It has poison. It's got poison water in Flint and all over the place. There's lots of people drinking poison water. There's this sort of situation going on in other parts of the country, and it's only going to get worse because they don't care about people. They care about the economy. And the crazy thing is the economy, because they're not shutting it down, they're going to keep having to shut places down or have, it's just going to go on and on and on. It's probably never going to end because no one is doing anything, any measures that need to be taken. Like in Tasmania, here where I live, it took them a while, and I thought they're not going to do this right. But finally, with some pressure from the other major party here, the Labor Party, they actually closed the borders of Tasmania. Unfortunately, that can be something that is very effective because we live on an island, and it's like raising the bridge on the moat, basically. And things have been quite good here. Now we're sort of reintroducing people from safer areas in Australia, and I'm not sure about overseas. So I don't know if that's going to start going pear-shaped again. I don't know if it's going to, sort of go pear-shaped and we'll be back to square one. But, so far in the last, say 4 months, it's been quite good here, and it's been sort of, there have been no new cases for, for a few months, basically. And that's what you need to do. There needs to be aggressive action. There needs to be people only going out when it's absolutely necessary. And there needs to be, in El Paso, there needs to be like a lockdown and almost like a curfew situation because it's so out of control. And I was watching there was a nurse in another city who said, it's so sad, there are people that she's been literally about to intubate, and they're still resisting. They're still saying things like they don't believe that COVID is real. And their last words are, I don't know why this is happening to me. And of course, they don't survive. I mean, this anti-mask thing, or some people call it, mask truthers. This is sort of insane to me. I mean, it really is. This isn't normal. I don't know what's going on with people. We've got some people in Australia doing this rubbish too. I mean, you don't have to look at that nurse to see that this is real. I mean, I don't know if there's some sort of stupid virus going around the world at the moment, but I cannot believe, if somebody would have said to me about 20 years ago that this sort of nonsense with the anti-mask stuff because freedom, and even in a pandemic where people are dying in the United States, like there must be like 230,000 or more now are dead, and there'll be a lot more. If somebody would have said to me, this is what people are going to be doing in a pandemic, they're going to be refusing to put on masks, if they don't care about themselves, they should care about other people. They should care. Like this nurse in El Paso, Luana Rivers, she said there was a 5-year-old died of COVID just recently. And like I said, there was a 20-year-old, a 40-year-old and upwards in ICU that were dying. No, this is serious stuff. It's not some older person's disease even. It's not even, that you have to have comorbidity. You have to have pre-existing conditions for this to be really serious. This is killing 20-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 30-year-olds. And here are these people insisting on not wearing masks because freedom. I mean, you couldn't make this up. And I really felt for that nurse, Luana Rivers. I really felt for her because intensive care is really, it can be a very stressful place. From personal experience, I know that it can be. It's a great place to work. I enjoyed working there, but I would imagine, I often think about these nurses in intensive care and I think, God, that they must be having a hell of a time. And they are. And later on, there'll be all sorts of awful stories like this woman, like this nurse who's relating what's happening in El Paso, in this UMC hospital. There'll be lots and lots of stories like that. It will be a nightmare. Somebody's going to probably even write a book about it. I mean, what's going on in El Paso is sort of Italy level kind of thing. What was happening to Italy in the beginning. What we must take from this is that, the United States, which is probably the bastion of defending capitalism and vilifying socialism, even though they're happy to give, socialism for the wealthy and corporations, giving the greatest transfer of wealth with these, fiscal stimulus, which Nancy Pelosi backed, and I think even AOC, they're okay with that. But they can't give people Medicare for all in a pandemic. They can't give people anything that they need, like some money to survive because they can't go to work. And they've got these so-called essential workers who are basically, they have to work because they can't afford not to. And they make out as if these essential workers are doing it out of the goodness of their heart and how heroic they are. Yes, they're not, but they're not intentionally being heroic. They just have to do it because the government won't support them properly. So that is a disgrace. And this is capitalism. This is neoliberalism. This is disgusting. And I worry, that, that cancer has been in Australia for about 30 or 40 years now. And I know that they want to turn this country into a United States eventually. I know that. You can tell just by the idiots that are in government at the present time and the lack of an alternative. Just like the Democratic Party, the Labour Party is becoming more and more dysfunctional and more irresponsible and more ineffective and moving further to the right because they make the excuse that if they don't win an election, it must be because they're not being conservative enough. That sort of idiocy. I don't believe people really believe that. These politicians know what they need to do, and they don't do it. It's a political choice, particularly when an economy can do all the things that are required during this pandemic and beyond. It's a political choice to abandon the public, and that's what's happening in El Paso. And El Paso will become a normal situation for the rest of the United States. It is the epicenter of what is going to happen eventually to every city as the government more and more sees the population as disposable and irrelevant.